Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I've got a great stream with a great guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. Before I get started, I just want to remind you that one of the ways we keep the lights on here is subscriptions to Blaze TV. So if you'd like to support this show and what we're doing while getting access to all the great behind the scenes content and all the shows from your favorite Blaze TV hosts, make sure to head to blazetv.com/Auron to get $20 off your subscription. That's blazetv.com/Auron. All right, guys, today I have the honor of having Congressman Riley Moore of West Virginia on. We were originally going to be discussing Pat Buchanan and the Presidential Medal of Freedom and the legacy of Pat Buchanan. We'll get into all of that in just a moment. But Congressman Moore, so many people are obviously looking at what's happened with Charlie Kirk. Many people are worried that we will not see a strong response from the government. Everyone looks at what happened with Donald Trump and the death of Corey Compertor. We know that left-wing terrorism is a huge problem, but we do see some Republicans saying, oh, well, it's violence on both sides, and we just need to cool down the temperature. But we just got an announcement from Donald Trump that Antifa will be declared a terrorist organization. Are you confident that this will mean we will see serious law and order in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's shooting?
Well, and thanks for having me on, but that's absolutely what I'm calling for. I think this is a good, not just a step, it's a good first step. This is a good first step. And we need to really get to the bottom of all of this. Who is funding this? Putting Antifa on a terror list is great. I think that's a good first step, but there's a lot more that we have to do to get to the bottom, to the roots of the rot that is going on in our society on the other side of this. Oh, there's violence on both sides. I'm not trying to hear any of that. I don't think anybody serious is trying to hear any of that right now. We have a murdered father of two, and we're talking about both sides. I'm not trying to hear any of that. I'm really not. So, and I'm excited to see where this goes and excited that maybe finally we're going to get to the root of what has been eating this country alive now for the last, I'd say, a couple decades.
No, I agree. So many people, myself included, have said, and Charlie Kirk said this himself, the NGOs need to get wrapped up. We need to see Antifa defeated. Obviously, there are active terror networks from the left inside the United States, well-funded and well-organized. They show up at these protests. They turn them into riots. They're designed to assault conservatives, to make them physically intimidated. That was clearly the attempt with the hit on Charlie Kirk, to drive conservatives underground. And the thing I'm very worried about, the thing that, well, like you said, I expect the Trump administration to take serious action, but the thing that concerns me for the health of the country is the reaction from the left, not just the radical left, but many mainstream leftist voices who have come out and not just attacked Charlie Kirk, not just said that they didn't like what he said or his character, these type of things. That would already be disgusting, but we would expect that. I am now seeing major leftist personalities declare themselves members of Antifa, say that they openly support the terror network, that this is okay, and they are not hesitating. Now, we just saw Jimmy Kimmel face some social censure for this. He lost his position at ABC News due to the fact that he lied about Charlie Kirk's murder and tried to cover for violent leftist terrorists, violating, I believe, some FCC regulations. But more importantly, I think the real pressure came from different advertisers and networks affiliates who recognized that they simply did not want this language on the books. They did not want to be promoting this kind of incendiary rhetoric inside the United States. Are you happy to see that step? And do you think there needs to be a wider campaign of pushing back against these leftist commentators who are clearly labeling people fascists, labeling themselves anti-fascists, feeding in to this militant terrorist organization and its mission in the United States?
Yeah, I think for us to get back to some norms which have been essentially washed away in this country, there are no norms, right? And just to be clear, on the other side of this, this isn't a political debate per se. These are revolutionaries. And on the other side, we have mainstream personalities in the media that are fomenting the types of activities that are going on here. I mean, the amount of times any of us, including myself, am called a Nazi or a white supremacist or whatever it is for some type of stance or view that I've taken because I'm a Catholic and I'm talking about my faith or whatever, which for some reason equates to being a Nazi. Yeah, I mean, we've got to continue to push back on this. And to those that say, look, they're censoring free speech and this and that, he has an employment contract, to be clear, okay? And there are, I'm sure, stipulations in that contract, just like any private employment, of how you're going to conduct yourself on your program. And if it doesn't align with that, that employer has that right to terminate that contract. We're not talking about somebody in the town square being prevented from voicing their crazy opinion about something. They have the right to be able to terminate. He can still talk about all this stuff if he wants to. He's just not going to do it on that program anymore. So don't forget, these are the same folks that were screaming to cancel Tucker on Fox News, which they were ultimately successful with, and now turning around and saying, oh, they're shutting down free speech in this country. No, an employer has decided that that doesn't align with their values and align with the type of program that they're trying to put out there. So I'm hoping that there's more of this. And I will say that the United States Senate now just, I think, about 15 minutes ago, voted unanimously to make, I think it's October 14th, but it's Charlie Kirk's birthday, a national day of remembrance for Charlie Kirk Day. Over here in the House, I don't think it's going to be like that. We're going to vote on a resolution here related to Charlie Kirk, and I'm not sure, you'll probably get a few Democrats vote for it. I'd say not the majority of them whatsoever. I happen to be on the House floor, sitting right next to Lauren Boebert when she was recognized by the Speaker of the House to state her point of order, and it was, could we have a prayer for Charlie Kirk? He has just been killed. And the Democrats went ballistic, just screamed us down, and we did not have a prayer on the House floor. That's their reaction within 45 minutes of him being declared deceased. That's their reaction. So unfortunately, I think that's where we are right now. And as a country, as folks here on the right, it is time to circle the wagons. We've got to stop the infighting. It's time to circle the wagons. It is time to put on the armor of God, to paraphrase Ephesians. And look, I'm praying for peace in this country through the victory of our faith. And that is what I'm hoping is going to happen here. But it is time to recognize this is a conflict right now in between the God-fearing and the godless.
Yeah, I think that plays itself out over and over again. You know, you're right to say that the left has canceled many a person. I mean, Roseanne Barr has made the point that Michelle Obama basically called Disney to get her thrown off, even though she had a highly rated TV show. It's the same network. It's ABC in both cases. Right. But when the left does it, it's fine. When the right does it, it's the end of free speech. Now, you pointed out there that the Democrats were unwilling to say a prayer over the family of Charlie Kirk in his name, in his honor. And that was one of the most despicable things I have ever seen. It really it was my stomach.
I was shocked because I was literally right there, right next to Lauren Boebert when she asked. I couldn't, and you couldn't probably see it on the camera, but we're probably about, just a few feet from the Democrats because we're on the further side of the aisle, close to their side of the aisle, and they were just leaning over, just pointing their fingers in our faces, screaming.
It was truly insane. And it makes me think, for so long, many of us have looked at the Republican Party and said so much of it, large swaths of it are just part of the Democratic Party. It's a uniparty. They feel the same. They vote the same on so many issues. They pick one or two that they can argue for different constituencies or different lobbying organizations. But ultimately, they have such a similar agenda that they seem to be buddy-buddy after they get done with these existential debates. But I think we're seeing something very different now. I think we're seeing a new crop of Republicans who recognize that the battle for this country, that the time is drawing short, and we don't have time to sit here and pleasantly try to pretend that the left is ultimately working with us or trying to come together with us. We need to make the allies that we can, but ultimately there needs to be some hard-nosed politics here. There needs to be an understanding that victory and wielding power in a righteous way to restore order to the United States and protect the citizens of the United States is critical, and we need to stop being, cringing about this. We need to stop whining about this, clutching our pearls about abstract principles that aren't even really our own. And instead, we need to do what's right for the American people. Do you feel like that uniparty moment is starting to break apart for American politics?
I do, particularly after that moment we just discussed right now on the House floor. And then if we come and we go do this resolution on the House floor here, I believe it's today or tomorrow, and what plays out is what I think is going to play out. I think it's going to become pretty clear to people. There's nobody on our side of the aisle, nobody in the House right now who is playing both sides of the fence on this issue. Not at all. And Charlie Kirk, in his martyrdom, has certainly actually been unifying, I would say, in that regard. It has woken people up, and you've seen it all over the country where people, and this is what Charlie did, right? He's trying to bring light to the darkness, and he's trying to speak truth and engage based on truth, based on our Constitution, based on our religious and biblical values, and not be afraid. And you've seen that from so many people. And I think that's the place that we are now as a Republican Party, at least in the House, I can say that. And I think we're going to see a lot more unification around this, because people are just, and I'm hearing it from, the Freedom Caucus to Main Street to anywhere in between, just, this is abhorrent. I cannot believe this is the way that they're acting, and we've got to stick together and go out here and win.
Yeah, and I think it's the fact that Charlie Kirk was so universally appreciated across many different factions of the Republican Party. He certainly had views that I think were different at this point than many of the mainstream congressional Republicans. He was, I think, moving more to what some people would call the new right, or however you want to describe that. But ultimately, the key is that Charlie Kirk had built friendships everywhere. He had been an effective communicator, an organizer. He was there for everyone when they needed him. He had goodwill built across the entire coalition. And so no matter how you feel about one group inside the Republican Party or the wider right wing, now I think is the time, as you say, for people to unify. We have a very dangerous terrorist threat inside the country. The left has been allowed to foment this. They have been allowed to infiltrate many organizations, receive large amounts of funding, continue to wield this basically one-sided political violence privilege that they have been gifted by the system. And we have a very small window in which to affect meaningful change in this area before the country really faces some horrific consequences. So I'm with you. I think that ultimately that will be the legacy that Charlie Kirk leaves behind. The same thing that he did in life, unifying a lot of people on the right together to bring us to a place where we can protect the country and we can make it great again.
Yeah, and I think one of the greatest things about Charlie Kirk, whether you believed, anywhere in our party, 100% of what he said, it was so just fascinating to watch him argue through these different points and positions that it would suck you in. And it was hard not to. Now, I basically ascribed to everything he said. Now, not all my colleagues did, but it was hard to say, oh, well, I don't like what he said here and I don't like what he said there, so now I don't like him. It was impossible not to like him. And he was so gifted in that open dialogue in debate that I think it's so quintessentially American, right, as it relates to our First Amendment, that I think everybody had a lot of admiration for that.
Well, and when we come back from our quick break, we're going to talk about another American that I think both you and I believe every American should have admiration for, Pat Buchanan. We'll talk about that in just a moment after we hear about Share the Arrows. We spend a lot of time here talking about what's going on in culture and politics, the battles, the noise, the craziness. But here's something different. If you're a woman listening right now, or if there's a woman in your life that you care about, you need to hear this. It's called Share the Arrows, and it's happening on October 11th in Dallas, Texas. It's hosted by Blaze TV's own Allie Beth Stuckey, and it's designed to encourage, equip, and speak truth into the lives of women who are trying to stand firm in this world. This is a day full of worship, teaching, and real conversations. So if you're a woman who's been craving encouragement in biblical truth, this is for you. And if you're a husband or a dad or a brother listening, think about your wife, daughter, or sister who needs this. In a culture that's constantly pulling in the wrong direction, this is a chance to stop, reset, and get grounded in biblical truth. Tickets and details are at sharethearrows.com. And yes, VIP options are still available. That's sharethearrows.com. All right, guys, we're back with Congressman Riley Moore. Just want to remind you that today we are pre-recorded. This is not a live stream, so we will not be able to take your questions after. Sorry about that. Now, Congressman Moore, the original subject we were going to discuss was you have suggested that Pat Buchanan should receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And this is so important because, again, a lot of people call this the new right. In many ways, it's really the old right, I think, is that, it's actually just the return of what was called the paleocons. But really, it's just the return of a truly conservative politics, one that is actually interested in conserving the people of the United States, not some abstract economic policy, not some idea of world-spanning empire, but instead saying what is best for the American people. And I think that's what Pat Buchanan stood for, because over and over again, we see Pat Buchanan warning that our foreign adventurism, our desire to send jobs overseas in the search of profits, the idea that we would ultimately be the world's policeman, or that we would open our borders to anyone and everyone who entered in and suddenly just assume they're American. All the warnings that Pat Buchanan laid out for us have just proven to be imminently true. And he said this at a time where it was extremely unpopular. He ran against his own incumbent president to make this point. This is a guy of incredible courage and conviction, and he's still alive for us to honor him. So I am just so glad that you have introduced this idea. But can you talk about Pat Buchanan, why you think that he's important?
Yeah. Now, look, I was introduced to, not personally, but his politics as a very young guy, like when I was a kid. My father was certainly interested in Pat Buchanan, had some family members interested in Pat Buchanan. And so I knew this name from an early age. And, I didn't, till I got older, come to appreciate, as I was starting to grow up, some of the things he wrote. And if people haven't read the book, The Death of the West, it came out in I think 2002, 23 years ago, basically all of it came true. It's so prescient, that book. All of the things that he had been talking about throughout his entire political career, he was basically right about them, like everything. Basically everything he turned out to be true. And, I hate to do this on your program, but I have to just read just one thing here real quick. It's from The Death of the West. And it ties into what we were talking about in the first segment, Charlie Kirk. So this is from The Death of the West. Americans who look on this cultural revolution as politics as usual do not understand it. It means to make an end of the country we love. It cannot be appeased. Its relentless, reckless use of terms like extremist, sexist, racist, homophobe, nativist, xenophobe, fascist, and Nazi testifies to how seriously it takes the struggle and how it views those who resist. To true believers in the revolution, the right is not just wrong, the right is evil. That's where we are right now. That was written in 2002.
Yeah, again, that's exactly right. And Pat Buchanan just repeatedly made critical points, like the fact that ultimately we were facing an enemy that was looking to dismantle the country and make discussion impossible. And we've seen this in the most stark relief we possibly can, obviously, with the shooting of Charlie Kirk. I think one of the main things that Pat Buchanan pushed on was the idea that in order to have a constitutional republic, in order to have a system in which debate and discussion is the mode in which you do politics, you must first share a culture and an identity. And this was very dangerous for him then, and is even dangerous for us to talk about now. The idea that America is not just a proposition, that we have principles, but those principles come from something. They come from a people, they come from a tradition, they come from a faith, they come from a unified belief that we hold and a unified history that we share. And that meant that Pat Buchanan understood something about immigration that I think many modern, even conservatives, do not. That, yes, illegal immigration is bad. And the fact that the Trump administration has basically brought illegal immigration down to zero is amazing. but also
Yes.
that legal immigration can itself be a great detriment to the United States, that does not actually always help the country, that we have to be very selective about who we bring in and when we bring them in. And it's very clear that programs like the H-1B visa have been really abused because they're not bringing in people that we desperately need. We see them bringing in people to do jobs like drive trucks and work in hotels and all kinds of things that are not critical positions where we need some high degree of skill. But instead, we're undercutting the American worker, especially in something like trucking, which has classically been this job that men who maybe did not get into college or didn't want to go that path, they could get into this industry and still make a good living for their family. And now we're seeing it dominated by what is basically an ethnic cartel of foreigners who are coming in and taking up those jobs. Can you talk a little bit about the H-1B program and why it's so destructive to the American working class?
No, I'd love to. And if not everybody's following everything I'm doing, but I'm on the House Appropriations Committee and actually put language into the labor HHS bill in our markup that specifically requested from the Department of Labor statistics on how American workers are being displaced by the H-1B visa program. So this is something that I'm actually very interested in looking at. And I'll give you a great example that happened here in my home state of West Virginia. We're building this large steel manufacturing facility currently. I come to find out, and we have welders and pipe fitters. We have all these folks, union and non-union alike. There's plenty of people to employ in the state of West Virginia in this regard. They went out and applied for H-1B visas to bring people in from Venezuela and all over the world to just save a couple bucks on the construction of this steel facility, when the end of the day, taxpayer money had also gone into this steel facility to help build it. It doesn't make any sense why we're doing this. And it's very simple. I mean, the H-1B program, I mean, say it's an accountant, right? And we've pushed everybody into college and telling them, go learn, a specific type of skill in college and you're going to be okay. Well, guess what? You're not. Because they will just find somebody in some other foreign country who has the exact same degree as you, except they're going to pay them less and bring them in on an H-1B visa program. So it is literally gutting the professional class in the United States all the way down to the trade level, which it hits home for me. I started my career off as a welder myself and had done a lot of work in that traditional trade, which goes back in my family. We've been doing that for a long time. And so this H-1B visa program is the skilled worker, especially the skilled worker, are the ones that are being punished the most by this. And it's got to end. This is not right because they're supposed to first try to search for an American that can fit that job. And then if not, then they go and look for some H-1B visa applicant who could fulfill that. That's not what they do. They're shopping around for the cheapest wages out there all over the world. There's nobody else in the world in terms of the American worker. There's nobody else in the world that has the entire labor market of the world competing in their own country. And like the way that we do. It's totally insane and completely backwards. There is a point to this society. We're not just an economic free trade zone. We are a country. We're supposed to be standing up for our people, our workers, our families, trying to provide a better quality of life for them, not just the bottom line for some corporations that, by the way, are some massive conglomerate that couldn't give two licks about what happens sometimes here in the United States.
Well, and the sad thing is it's not even good economics, because if you look at Ricardo, when he talks about comparative advantage, he's assuming that labor will be fixed, that you're not going to be sending a bunch of people across the borders. He assumes that the countries involved in the trading will favor their own nations first. So even if you are looking at classical economics, it's even bad economics in that sense. It's a disaster across the board. And I'm really glad that you pointed out that this is across classes, because of course, as we were saying, it hits the blue collar class, but it's also phasing out white collar jobs as well. The whole story we've always heard is that we need these immigrants because they're going to do jobs that Americans won't do. But I now know many people in my personal life who are working in the tech sector, and they've said, I've all but given up moving forward in my job because the entire purpose now of my company is to outsource work to India. The minute you get beyond a certain level, you're going to get phased out. They're going to find someone else to do this job, to the point, as where you're saying with the job listings, they even hide the job listings to make sure that no Americans can find them. And if America does find them, they shut them down, because the whole purpose of the hidden job listing is just so they can technically check the box and then get the H-1Bs they applied for. So the entire system is just rigged front to back. And I'm wondering, is there a case to be made that it should just be shut down entirely? With it's this rife with abuse, and we have so many Americans who are searching for opportunities in the United States itself. I know this would be politically difficult, but is there a case to be made that ultimately we should be protecting American jobs by simply shutting off the flow of foreign laborers to corporations that are betraying the United States?
I think there is a case to be made. Now, I'm open to hearing any type of exception that's out there, some critical industry I'm not aware of. When they say, well, we can't find any workers, any Americans to do these jobs. Yeah, you're not going to find any Americans that are willing to do these jobs with the degree and the student debt that they have, talking about these professional jobs at the wages in which you're trying to pay them. That's the difference there, right? I mean, they're going to India and going to find them. People confuse the H-1B visa with like the O-1 visa, which is, kind of like the genius visa where we're going and finding and bringing the smartest minds into the United States. It's a very different thing. And certainly I think that's a good thing, right? That's kind of served our interest over the years. The H-1B visa is totally different than that. And I think it is time to have a conversation and revisit this topic and say, hey, look, enough is enough. We're talking out of one side of our mouth and saying, hey, go to college, become an accountant, become this, become that. And then we're giving the jobs to folks who aren't even in this country, are not from this country. And it's all getting outsourced at the end of the day. So, and of course, it hurts the blue collar worker as well, but it's hitting all the classes in this country in terms of folks that have real skills that they have honed and they need to be able to use here for in these jobs and these job postings that we have here in the United States. So to me, yes, we need to start having this conversation, and really that's why I put that report language in that bill, because I want to have official government numbers that I can point to and say, well, this is what the Department of Labor said about how many American jobs are being how many American workers are being displaced by the H-1B visa. And having that data is where we can start to say, okay, now let's get serious about what we're going to do here.
Congressman, I know we have limited time with you, so I'm just going to ask you one more question because I think it's related to this entire problem. One of the issues that we have with the current crop of H-1Bs, people coming in, is fallacious degrees from colleges. It's very clear that many of these degrees coming in, these credentials from India and these other places, these are not real universities, or they're not at the same level that American universities are operating on. And so many workers are coming in from these foreign countries with college degrees, lots of high quality credentials, but they get here and the people who are running these businesses recognize they can't actually do the job. I know, again, multiple people who have had to train H-1B workers who are working for well less than they are on how to do their job because the H-1B workers didn't know how to do any of the work. And then they fired the people who finally trained them to learn how to do the work once the H-1B workers were brought in. Now, this means that the college credential is a big barrier in the United States. And one of the reasons we have to use it is the fact that disparate impact exists in our laws. We're not allowed for businesses to give out tests to evaluate competency because that's considered a violation of Griggs versus Duke Power, which was kind of overturned, but then recodified back into the 92 Civil Rights Act by Republicans, horrifically enough. And so at the core, I think, of this credentialing problem, and therefore tied to our H-1B problem, is the fact that civil rights law keeps us from breaking out of this college monopoly. We can't just go out and create some kind of certification or some kind of test to help people get a job without having to go through this 4-year leftist radicalization project that we call the American University. What do you think about the impact of that current restriction on American businesses? And do you think there's a way forward for us to break that college monopoly, to find a way to get people who are qualified in America jobs or training that they need without having to force their way into the college racket.
No, you're absolutely right. We have to. And there has to be some minimum standard out there that folks are going to have to meet. You know, if you're going and getting a degree online from, you know, India Accounting University, just made that up, but that's not the same as going to, I don't know, West Virginia University and getting an accounting degree. And so there does have to be some standards that are met here. And I think that's only fair to obviously the employees, but also the employer in terms of what they're getting. And I mean, I'm a big guy on dignity of work and dignity of the human being and human flourishing. And the idea that we have so many people in this country training their own replacements is just disgusting. It's really sad. And you think about, I mean, what that probably does to somebody in terms of their psyche, their own well-being, their own sense of self-worth. I mean, it's terrible to think about. I hate that.
Absolutely. I agree. And I'm glad that you're aware of this, that you're pushing back against this. And I hope that you're successful, that you can win more people over to your cause, because the current operation of our immigration system is a disaster. I'm so glad the Trump administration has pushed back on that, on the border and illegal immigration. And I'm glad that guys like you are pushing back on the legal immigration side as well. So thank you once again, Congressman Moore, for coming on. Guys, again, sorry, we cannot take any questions because this was a pre-tape today, but we really thank you coming by. And as always, I will talk to you next time.